Okay, so we are reading Many Lives, Many Masters by Dr. Brian Weiss. We are on chapter 4 of the book, page number 34 of the PDF.
I see a square white house with a sandy road in front. People on horses are going back and forth. Catherine was speaking in her usually dreamy whisper. There are trees, a plantation, a big house with a bunch of smaller houses, like slave houses. It's very hot. It's in the South, Virginia. She thought the date was 1873. She was a child. There are horses and lots of crops, corn, tobacco. She and the other servants ate in a kitchen of the big house. She was black and her name was Abby. She felt a foreboding and her body tensed. The main house was on fire and she watched it burn down. I progressed her 15 years in time to 1888. I'm wearing an old dress, cleaning a mirror on the second floor of a house, a brick house with windows, with lots of panes. The mirror is wavy, not straight, and it has knobs on the end. The man who owns the house is named James Manson. He has a funny coat with 3 buttons and a big black collar. He has a beard. I don't recognize him as someone in Catherine's present lifetime. He treats me well. I live in a house on the property. I clean the rooms. There is a schoolhouse on the property, but I'm not allowed in the school. I make butter too.
So again, over here, the monitor or the therapist in this case is guiding the person to go to which year, where to look, what to do, right? So the guidance becomes important to really understand where what is happening.
Catherine was whispering slowly, using very simple terms and paying great attention to detail. Over the next 5 minutes, I learned how to make butter. Abby's knowledge of churning butter was new to Catherine too. I moved her ahead in time. I am with somebody, but I don't think we are married. We sleep together, but we don't always live together. I feel okay about him, but nothing special. I don't see any children. There are apple trees and ducks. Other people are in the distance. I'm picking apples. Something is making my eyes itch. Catherine was grimacing and with her eyes closed. It's the smoke. The wind is blowing it this way. The smoke from burning wood. They are burning up wooden barrels. She was coughing now. It happens a lot. They are making the inside of the barrels black, tar to waterproof. After the excitement of last week's session, I was eager to reach the in-between state again. We had already spent 90 minutes exploring her lifetime as a servant. I had learned about bedspreads, butter, and barrels. I was hungry for a more spiritual lesson. Forsaking my patients, I advanced her to her death.
So again, the therapist also wants to know what happens after death, right? Now, this is always an enigma that after we pass on, what happens, right? Everyone wants to know that.
It's hard to breathe. My chest hurts so much. Catherine was gasping in obvious pain. My heart hurts. It's beating fast. I'm so cold. My body's shaking. Catherine began to shiver. People are in the room giving me leaves to drink, a tea. It smells funny. They're rubbing a liniment on my chest. Fever, but I feel very cold. She quietly died. Floating up to the ceiling, she could see her body in the bed. A small, shriveled woman in her 60s. She was just floating, waiting for someone to come and help her. She became aware of a light, feeling herself drawn towards it. The light was becoming brighter and more luminous. We waited in silence as minutes slowly passed. Suddenly, she was in another lifetime, thousands of years before Abby.
So again, very clearly over here, it says that you float up, right? So you're releasing from the body. I had actually done testing. I've mentioned this before when my grandmother passed away. And generally speaking, it takes anything between 0 to 24 hours for that energy to disconnect. What he's saying over here, floating away. My grandmother disconnected exactly in 13 hours and 14 minutes. Right. So first the body will float up, that disconnection will take place. And then generally speaking, they see a light. That's why in the Tibetan culture also, they'll sit around a person who's dying and say, find the light, because that is where you need to actually go. Many times when you get stuck, if you are releasing the body and you get stuck, then that's what in the Monroe philosophy, you get stuck in focus 23, right? So in this case, of course, she found the light, and immediately under the hypnosis in the therapy session, she found herself in another life, which was thousands of years before Abby was born, right? Now, again, when we are going into these altered states of consciousness, time and space, the way that we deal with it and the way that we know about it is very distinct, right? So you can go from one point to another point like that. There is no distinction.
Niket, 1 minute. I just wanted to
Yeah.
ask, like people, when people pass out or die,
Yeah.
people write these messages, rest in peace and Om Shanti. So
Hmm.
you could just write, like you write always, that may the soul find the light or something like
Correct.
that.
Absolutely. That's the more important way. If you
Okay.
look at our culture, we actually cremate the body, right? In the Hindu culture. Rest in peace is when they are buried, right? In
Okay.
the Hindu culture, there's no rest in peace because you're
Because they
transcending,
born again,
you're going into another life. In the
another body.
Christian culture, because they removed the this thing of what do you call it? Reincarnation. What we read in the book also in Constantine, he removed the concept of reincarnation. So that's why they are saying rest in peace. So the body is buried and then you rest in peace. So rest in peace in the Hindu concept is not the correct way to look at it. Okay, finding the light is actually the correct way. So this is something that we experienced also when we did the out of body experience program at the institute with William Bullman, and then in that it was also again this very concept of going to find the light, going to find the light. In fact, there was one exercise, and he said that this chant is chanted by a Dutch person, and it really puts me into a transcendental state, and I immediately go into an expanded state of consciousness. When we went through that exercise, it turned out to be the Mahamrityunjaya jap, and he didn't even know that it was the Mahamrityunjaya, but it was having that effect on him. So that's why Mahamrityunjaya becomes a very powerful jap to achieve a certain state of consciousness.
So even in the Lifeline program, we experience this, right?
Correct.
That there is life beyond death. So you are
Absolutely.
transcending and there is a space.
Correct. Absolutely. So in the Lifeline program, this is experienced very vividly. In fact, people really have a very vivid interaction about this.
Yeah.
Catherine was softly whispering, I see lots of garlic hanging in an open room. I can smell it. It is believed to kill many evils in the blood and to cleanse the body. But you must take it every day. The garlic is outside too, on top of a garden. Other herbs are there, figs, dates, and other herbs. These plants help you. My mother is buying garlic and the other herbs. Somebody in the house is sick. These are strange roots. Sometimes you just keep them in your mouth or ears or other openings. You just keep them in.
So again, it is believed that garlic keeps away evil spirits. Okay, how? I mean, I have not really tested for the veracity of this, but yeah, this is a thinking that maybe because of the smell, the evil spirits keep away from your space if you're hanging garlic all around the house.
I see an old man with a beard. He's one of the healers in the village. He tells you what to do. There is some type of plague killing the people. They're not embalming because they are afraid of the disease. People are just buried. The people are unhappy about this. They feel the soul cannot pass on this way, contrary to Catherine's after death reports. But so many have died. The cattle are dying too. Water, floods. People are sick because of the floods. She apparently just realized this bit of epidemiology. I also have some disease from the water. It makes your stomach hurt. The disease is of the bowel and stomach. You lose so much water from the body. I'm by the water to bring more back, but that's what is killing us. I bring the water back. I see my mother and brothers. My father has already died. My brothers are very sick. I paused before progressing her in time. I was fascinated by the way her conceptions of death and the afterlife changed so much from lifetime to lifetime. And yet her experience of death itself was so uniform, so similar every time. A conscious part of her would leave the body around the moment of death, floating above and then being drawn to a wonderful, energizing light. She would then wait for someone to come and help her. The soul automatically passed on. Embalming, burial rituals, or any other procedure after death had nothing to do with it. It was automatic, no preparation necessary, like walking through a just opened door.
So again, this another thing, right? You pass on, you float out of the body, and then you're looking for the light. Many times you're looking for someone to help to guide you to go where you're going, right? You need a guidance because you're going into an uncharted territory from the level of consciousness that we are operating in this human life existence, right? And again, all the rituals that are there are basically made to help people who get stuck on a thumb rule. 99% of the people will not get stuck. They will simply move on. They will simply transcend and go into the next level of consciousness that they are supposed to go into. But yeah, when people get stuck, it's an issue and you need to do stuff to allow them to move on.
The land is barren and dry. I see no mountains around here, just land, very flat and dry. One of my brothers has died. I'm feeling better, but the pain is still there. However, she did not live much longer. I'm lying on a pallet with some type of covering. She was very ill, and no amount of garlic or other herbs could prevent her death. Soon, she was floating above her body, drawn to the familiar light. She waited patiently for someone to come to her.
So again, you see, when you go to the light, right? And this normally in the Monroe concept, you go into focus 27. Generally speaking, you will always have a welcoming committee, people who are associated with you or at least look like you. They will receive you in focus 27. This is something that most of the participants of the Lifeline program, they actually see this happening when we are going into those altered states.
Her head began to roll slowly from side to side, as if she was scanning some scene. Her voice was again husky and loud. They tell me there are many gods, for God is in each of us. I recognize the voice from the in between lives state by its huskiness as well as by the decidedly spiritual tone of the message. What she said next left me breathless, pulling the air from my lungs. Your father is here, and your son, who is a small child. Your father says you will know him because his name is Avram, and your daughter is named after him. Also, his death was due to his heart. Your son's heart was also important, for it was backward, like a chicken's. He made a great sacrifice for you out of his love. His soul is very advanced. His death satisfied his parents' deaths. Also, he wanted to show you that medicine could only go so far, that its scope is very limited.
So again, many times very profound messages can come in. So naturally, the Dr. Brian West's son seems to have passed on in this life, and naturally, she is very clearly saying that his father and his son are there to send him a message.
Catherine stopped speaking, and I sat in an awed silence as my numbed mind tried to sort things out. The room felt icy cold. Catherine knew very little about my personal life. On my desk, I had a baby picture of my daughter grinning happily with her two bottom baby teeth in an otherwise empty mouth. My son's picture was next to it. Otherwise, Catherine knew virtually nothing about my family or my personal history. I had been well schooled in traditional psychotherapeutic techniques. The therapist was supposed to be a tabula rasa, a blank tablet upon which the patient could project her own feelings, thoughts, and attitudes. These then could be analyzed by the therapist, enlarging the arena of the patient's mind. I had kept this therapeutic distance with Catherine. She really knew me only as a psychiatrist, nothing of my past or of my private life. I had never even displayed my diplomas in the office. The greatest tragedy in my life had been the unexpected death of our firstborn son, Adam, who was only 23 days old when he died, early in 1971. About 10 days after we had brought him home from the hospital, he had developed respiratory problems and projectile vomiting. The diagnosis was extremely difficult to make. Total anomalous pulmonary venous drainage with an atrial septal defect, we were told. It occurs once in approximately every 10 million births. The pulmonary veins, which were supposed to bring oxygenated blood back to the heart, were incorrectly routed, entering the heart on the wrong side. It was as if his heart were turned around backward. Extremely, extremely rare.
So right, so his heart was turned around backwards, which this Dr. Brian West knew, and there was no way for Catherine to know that, right? So the data naturally is coming from some kind of an altered state. Somewhere else it is coming from.
Heroic open heart surgery could not save Adam, who died several days later. We mourned for months, our hopes and dreams dashed. Our son Jordan was born a year later, a grateful balm for our wounds. At the time of Adam's death, I had been wavering about my earlier choice of psychiatry as a career. I was enjoying my internship in internal medicine, and I had been offered a residency position in medicine. After Adam's death, I firmly decided that I would make psychiatry my profession. I was angry that modern medicine, with all of its advanced skills and technology, could not save my son, this simple, tiny baby. My father had been in excellent health until he experienced a massive heart attack early in 1979 at the age of 61. He survived the initial attack, but his heart wall had been irretrievably damaged, and he died 3 days later. This was about 9 months before Catherine's first appointment. My father had been a religious man, more ritualistic than spiritual. His Hebrew name Avram suited him better than the English Alvin. 4 months after his death, our daughter Amy was born and she was named after him.
So again, Catherine, the person entity speaking through Catherine, got the name of the father right also.
Here in 1982, in my quiet, darkened office, a deafening cascade of hidden secret truths was pouring upon me. I was swimming in a spiritual sea, and I loved the water. My arms were goose flesh. Catherine could not possibly know this information. There was no place even to look it up. My father's Hebrew name, that I had a son who died in infancy from a 1 in 10 million heart defect, my brooding about medicine, my father's death, and my daughter's naming. It was too much, too specific, too true. This unsophisticated laboratory technician was a conduit for transcendental knowledge. And if she could reveal these truths, what else was there? I needed to know more. Who, I sputtered, who is there? Who tells you these things? The masters, she whispered. The master spirits tell me. They tell me I have lived 86 times in physical state. Catherine's breathing slowed and her head stopped rolling from side to side. She was resting. I wanted to go on, but the implications of what she had said were distracting me. Did she really have 86 previous lifetimes? And what about the masters? Could it be? Could our lives be guided by spirits who have no physical bodies but who seem to possess great knowledge?
So this is something that when we are going into the in the processes in Focus 27, there actually is a planning center. We have guides and spirit helpers who are helping us. This is something that is spoken a lot about in shamanism also, that we always have guides and helpers who are actually guiding how we are operating, right? Of course, they don't force us to do anything because we do have free will when we are in this human life existence. But having said that, the universe is constantly guiding us as to where we should be going. That's why paying attention to what is happening around us is really important. And then stepping out of the way. The small guy, we talk about the small guy and the big guy in the excursion workshop. So the small guy, we need to step out of the way of the big guy, right? The basic point is that the small guy, which is connected a lot with the ego, thinks that it knows everything, but it actually doesn't, because the big guy knows much more than the small guy. So these spirits are actually connected with the big guy. So they're constantly guiding us, advising us, provided we open ourselves to listen to that guidance.
Are there steps on the way to God? Was this real? I found it difficult to doubt in view of what she had just revealed. Yet, I still struggled to believe. I was overcoming years of alternative programming. But in my head and my heart and my gut, I knew she was right. She was revealing truths.
So again, very clear, right? We are all born into a belief system. We are constantly rubbed, the beliefs are constantly rubbed into us in the during the childhood, mainly from the years of 1 to 6. Now, when something very different from what our belief system says pops into our life, it's always like a culture shock, right? It's a shock that we go through, and that becomes difficult to transcend. But again, seeing, experiencing is what the name of the game is. Now, if it is being experienced by a person, they can't really doubt it. Although sometimes people have blinkers in the eyes, or they put their head into the sand like a ostrich, but that doesn't work, because the truth will always find its way out.
And what about my father and my son? In a sense, they were still alive. They had never really died. They were talking to me years after their burials and proving it by providing specific, very secret information. And since all that was true, was my son as advanced spiritually as Catherine had said? Did he indeed agree to be born to us and then die 23 days later in order to help us with our karmic debts? And in addition, to teach me about medicine and humankind, to nudge me back to psychiatry? I was very heartened by these thoughts. Beneath my chill, I felt a great love stirring, a strong feeling of oneness and connection with the heavens and the earth. I had missed my father and my son. It was good to hear from them again.
So again, naturally, Catherine is giving in very specific information that there was no way in which she could actually know. Right. And it's also been said that really highly advanced spiritual entities can come into the earth for a very short time in order to help the progress of some people or to nudge a person in the right way, etc., etc. So this is also something that is constantly being said.
My life would never be the same again. A hand had reached down and irreversibly altered the course of my life. All of my reading, which had been done with careful scrutiny and skeptical detachment, fell into place. Catherine's memories and messages were true. My intuitions about the accuracy of her experiences had been correct. I had the facts, I had the proof. Yet, even in that very instant of joy and understanding, even in that moment of the mystical experience, the old and the familiar, logical and doubting part of my mind lodged an objection.
So again, this is naturally the ego self, the small mind, because now you're losing control, right? The ego mind wants to keep control. It knows everything. Now, this is something that it doesn't know and it is transcending its control. So always the ego mind will kick in. This is also the left side of the brain operating rather than the right side.
Perhaps it's just ESP or some psychic skill. Granted, it's quite a skill, but it doesn't prove reincarnation or master spirits. Yet, this time I knew better. The thousands of cases recorded in the scientific literature, especially those of children speaking foreign languages to which they had never been exposed, or having birthmarks at the site of previous mortal wounds, of these same children, knowing where treasured objects were hidden or buried thousands of miles away and decades or centuries earlier, all echoed Catherine's message. I knew Catherine's character and her mind. I knew what she was and what she wasn't. No, my mind could not fool me this time. The proof was too strong and too overwhelming. This was real. She would verify more and more as our sessions progressed.
So naturally, again, birthmarks, right? Many times you have these blemishes, etc., where you may have been beaten, and there's some resonance which is creating that bruise over there. Like, it can be a bruise or where you're stabbed, you can have a line there, a cut or another blemish, and so on and so forth.
At times, over the succeeding weeks, I would forget the power and immediacy of this session. At times, I would fall back into the rut of everyday life, worrying about the usual things. Doubts would surface. It was as if my mind, when not focused, tended to drift back into old patterns, beliefs, and skepticism.
So now this is also very important. Whenever we are making a change, a new neural pathway gets created in our brains, but the old pathway still remains. So When you are in a habit of doing something and a pattern is repeating in your life, we need to pay attention because we need to transcend the patterns. Otherwise, we'll fall back into a rut, right? That's why we asked this question: when was the last time you did something new? So it's very important to do new things in your life, because of which you can actually start progressing. If you're stuck in doing the same mundane things day in and day out, then there's going to be no progress in your life. So doing new things becomes very important, right? Otherwise, we are stuck in the patterns.
But then I would remind myself this actually happened. I appreciated how difficult it is to believe these concepts without having personal experience. The experience is necessary to add emotional belief to intellectual understanding, but the impact of experience always fades to some degree.
So again, we always keep saying you have to have knowledge or information and you have to have the experience. Then it becomes a knowing. So he's saying the exact same thing.
At first, I was not aware of why I was changing so much. I knew I was more calm and patient, and others were telling me how peaceful I looked, how I seemed more rested and happier. I felt more hope, more joy, more purpose, and more satisfaction in my life. It dawned on me that I was losing the fear of death. I wasn't afraid of my own death or of non existence. I was less afraid of losing others, even though I would certainly miss them. How powerful the fear of death is.
So whenever we are getting into these states, right, whenever we are experiencing these transcendental spiritual happenings in these states, one thing is clear, that it creates changes in our life, right? Because your new belief systems start to pop up. New neural pathways in your brain start to develop. The way that you're looking at stuff, the way that things are occurring to you start to shift, right? And with that, a lot starts to change in one's life. And the other thing is that you when you're going into these states, you start to understand that there is something beyond death. So death is never an end; it is a beginning. And this, what we have seen is that, especially when people attend the Lifeline program, the fear of death definitely diminishes. There's no question in that, right? Now, also, most of us are more afraid of the death of people around us than for ourselves to die. But then that is related to being attached, right? The basic game that we need to play is to have attachment with detachment. So you're doing everything, but you're still not attached with whatever is happening around you, whether it is a person, it's a place, or a thing.
People go to such great lengths to avoid the fear, midlife crisis, affairs with younger people, cosmetic surgeries, exercise obsessions, accumulating material possessions, procreating to carry on a name, striving to be more and more youthful, and so on.
So again, to avoid fear, the fear of death, people do so many different kinds of things, right? But ultimately, you have no control over it.
We are frightfully concerned with our own deaths, sometimes so much so that we forget the real purpose of our lives. I was also becoming less obsessive. I didn't need to be in control all the time. Although I was trying to become less serious, this transformation was difficult for me. I still had much to learn.
So again, basically, the point is that we would like to control everything that's happening in our life. But the shift that we are looking for is to move from controlling to trusting. That a higher energy, some kind of a organizing field, organizing force, organizing entity is actually making everything move around us.
My mind was indeed now open to the possibility, even the probability, that Catherine's utterances were real. The incredible facts about my father and my son could not be obtained through the usual senses. Her knowledge and abilities certainly proved an outstanding psychic ability. I made sense to believe her. It made sense to believe her, but I remained wary and skeptical about what I read in the popular literature. Who are these people reporting psychic phenomena, life after death, and other amazing paranormal events? Are they trained in the scientific method of observation and validation? Despite my overwhelming and wonderful experience with Catherine, I knew my naturally critical mind would continue to scrutinize every new fact, every piece of information. I would check to see if it fit into the framework being built with every session. I would examine it from every angle with a scientist's microscope, and yet I could no longer deny that the framework was already there.
So the organization behind the chaos, right? The framework is always there. It's just that we are not aware of it. And of course, the skeptic mind will always come into play and always want to figure out, what's happening and what's not happening.
Chapter 5. We were still in the middle of the session. Catherine ended her rest and began talking about green statues in front of a temple. I roused myself from my reverie and listened. She was in an ancient lifetime, somewhere in Asia, but I was still with the masters. Incredible, I thought to myself. She's talking about previous lifetimes, about reincarnation, and yet compared to hearing messages from the masters, it feels anticlimactic. I was already realizing, however, that she had to go through a lifetime before she could leave her body and reach the in between state. She could not reach the state directly, and it was only there that she could reach the masters.
So basically what is happening is that, again, you have to go into that in-between state to make that connection, right? So again, when we are looking at it from the Monroe principle, when you reach focus 21, that is the edge of physical reality where connections can be made, but the maximum connections take place when you get into the belief system territories of focus level 24, 25, 26, and in focus 27.
The green statues are in front of a large temple building, she whispered softly. A building with peaks and brown balls. There are 17 steps in front, and there is a room after you climb the steps. Incense is burning. Nobody has shoes. Their heads are shaven. They have round faces and dark eyes. They are dark skinned. I am there. I have hurt my foot and have gone there for help. My foot is swollen. I can't step on it. Something is stuck in my foot. They put some leaves on my foot, strange leaves. Tannis, tannin or tannic acid, which occurs naturally in the roots, wood, bark, leaves, and fruits of many plants, has been used since ancient times as a medicine because of its styptic or astringent properties. First, my foot was cleansed. This is a ritual before the gods. There is some poison in my foot. I stepped on something. My knee is swollen. My leg is heavy with streaks on it. Blood poisoning? They cut a hole in the foot and put something very hot on it. Catherine was now writhing in pain. She was also gagging from some terribly bitter potion that she was given to drink. The potion was made from yellow leaves. She healed, but the bones in her foot and her leg were never the same again. I progressed her in time. She saw only a bleak and poverty-stricken life. She lived with her family in a small one-room hut without a table. They ate some kind of rice, like a cereal, but they were always hungry. She aged rapidly, never escaping the poverty or the hunger, and she died. I waited, but I could see Catherine's exhaustion. Before I could awaken her, however, she told me that Robert Jarrod needed my help. I had no idea who Robert Jarrod was or how I could help him. There was no more. After awakening from the trance, Catherine again remembered many of the details of her past life recall. She remembered nothing at all of the after death experiences, nothing from the in between state, nothing of the masters or of the incredible knowledge that had been revealed. I asked her a question. Catherine, what does the term masters mean to you? She thought this was a golf tournament. She was improving rapidly now, but she still had difficulty integrating the concept of reincarnation into her theology. Therefore, I asked not to tell her. Therefore, I decided not to tell her about the masters yet. Besides, I wasn't sure how you broke the news to someone that she was an incredibly talented trance medium who could channel wonderful transcendental knowledge from the master spirits.
So again, naturally, information is getting downloaded, and many times we are not ready to accept it in a normal state of consciousness. So that it becomes very important for the therapist to actually observe what he's going to say and what he's not going to say.
Catherine agreed to allow my wife to attend the next session. Carol is a well trained, highly skilled psychiatric social worker, and I wanted her opinion about these incredible happenings. After I told her what Catherine had said about my father and our son, Adam, she was eager to help. I had no trouble taking notes of every word from the lifetimes when Catherine whispered quite slowly. But the master spoke much more quickly, and I decided to tape record everything. 1 week later, Catherine came in for her next session. She continued to improve with diminished fears and anxieties. Her clinical improvement was definite, but I still was not sure why she was so much better. She had remembered drowning as a Rhonda, having her throat slashed as Johanne, being a victim of a waterborne epidemic as Louisa, and other terrifyingly traumatic events. She had also experienced or re experienced lifetimes of poverty and servitude and of abuse within her family. The latter are examples of the day in and day out mini traumas that also get drowned into our psyches. The remembrance of both types of lifetimes could be contributing to her improvement. But another possibility existed. Could the spiritual experience itself be helping? Could the knowledge that death is not what it appears to be contribute to a sense of well being, of diminution of fears? Could the entire process, not just the memories themselves, be part of the cure?
So absolutely, all these questions we need to answer. Just 1 second, someone's at the door.
Catherine's psychic abilities were increasing and she was becoming even more intuitive. She still had problems with Stuart, but she felt able to cope with him more effectively. Her eyes sparkled, her skin glowed. She had had a strange dream during the week, she announced, but she could only remember a fragment of it. She had dreamed that the red fin of a fish was embedded in her hand. She went under quickly and easily, reaching a deep level of hypnosis within minutes. I see some type of cliffs. I'm standing on the cliffs, looking down. I should be looking for ships. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm wearing something blue, a blue type of pants, short pants with strange shoes, black shoes, and they buckle. The shoes have buckles, very funny shoes. I see on the horizon there are no ships. Catherine was whispering softly. I progressed her in time to the next significant event in her life. We are drinking ale, stout ale. It's very dark. The tankards are thick. They are old, put together with metal stays. It's very foul smelling in this place, and many people are in there. It's very loud. Everybody is talking. Very noisy.
So again, even in these states, all the sensory perceptions are there: smell, taste, sound, visuals, everything is there.
I asked her if she could hear anybody calling her name. Christian. Christian is my name. She was a male again. We're just eating some type of meat and drinking ale. It's dark and very bitter tasting. They put salt on it. She could not see a year. They're talking about a war, about ships blockading some ports, but I can't hear where it is. If they would be quiet, we could hear, but everyone is talking and noisy. I asked her where she was. Hampstead, Hampstead, phonetic spelling. It's a port, a seaport in Wales. They are talking British. She went ahead in time to when Christian was on his ship. I can smell something, something burning. It's a terrible smell, burning wood, but also something else. It burns your nose. Something in the distance is on fire, some type of vessel, a sailing vessel. We are loading. We are loading something with gunpowder. Catherine was becoming visibly agitated. It's something with gunpowder, very black. It sticks to your hands. You have to move fast. The ship has a green flag on it. The flag is dark. It's a green and yellow flag. There is some type of crown with 3 points on it. Suddenly, Catherine grimaced with pain. She was in agony. Ah, she grunted, the pain in my hand, the pain in my hand. There's some metal, hot metal in my hand. It's burning me. Oh, oh.
So again,
I,
even though in the altered states, in the physical body, certain pains and feelings may be experienced.
I remembered the dream fragment and understood now that the red fin embedded in her hand. I blocked the pain, but she was still moaning.
So again, the psychotherapist can tell her that don't feel the pain, and then she won't feel the pain.
The splinters are metal. The ship we were on was destroyed, the port side. They have the fire under control. Many men have been killed, many men. I have survived, only my hand is hurt, but it heals with time. I took her head in time, letting her pick out the next significant event. I see some type of print shop, printing something with blocks and ink. They're printing and binding books. The books have leather covers and strings holding them together. Leather strings. I see a red book. It's something about history. I can't see the title. They haven't finished the printing. The books are wonderful. Their covers are so smooth, the leather. They're wonderful books. They teach you. Obviously, Christian enjoyed seeing and touching the books, and he dimly realized the potential of learning this way. He seemed to be largely uneducated, however. I progressed Christian to the last day of his life. I see a bridge over a river. I'm an old man, very old. It's difficult to walk. I'm walking over the bridge to the other side. I feel pain in my chest, pressure, terrible pressure, pain in my chest. Oh, Catherine was making gurgling sounds, experiencing the apparent heart attack that Christian was having on the bridge. Her breathing was rapid and shallow. Her face and neck were covered with sweat. She began to cough and to gasp for air. I was concerned. Was re experiencing a heart attack from a previous lifetime dangerous? This was a new frontier. Nobody knew the answers. Finally, Christian died. Catherine was now lying peacefully on the couch. Breathing deeply and evenly, I let out a deep sigh of relief.
So again, basically what is happening is that we can actually feel the experience, right? But generally speaking, it is not dangerous. That's what we have come to understand.
I feel free, free. Catherine gently whispered, I'm just floating in darkness, just floating. There is a light around and spirits, other people.
So again,
And
in these altered states, right, the spirits are always there. Even over here, spirits are always there. It's just that we don't have the ability to actually feel them. Our guides, our masters, the spirits of the space, they're always around us.
I asked if she had any thoughts about the lifetime that had just ended, her life as Christian. I should have been more forgiving, but I wasn't. I did not forgive the wrongs that people did to me, and I should have. I didn't forgive the wrongs. I held them inside, and I harbored them for years. I see eyes, eyes.
Okay, so now again, when we think that we are going to be judged once we pass on, but it is nothing like that. We actually review, we create, we look at what we had planned to experience in this lifetime and whether we have achieved it or not. So we review, make a review for ourselves. Okay, this is very, very clear when we are going into the expanded states again.
Eyes, I echoed, sensing the contact. What kind of eyes? The eyes of the master spirits, Catherine whispered. But I must wait. I have things to think about. Minutes passed in tense silence. How will you know when they are ready? I asked expectantly, breaking the long silence. They will call me, she answered. More minutes passed. Then, suddenly, her head began to roll from side to side, and her voice, hoarse and firm, signaled the change. There are many souls in this dimension. I am not the only one. We must be patient. That is something I have never learned either. There are many dimensions. I asked her whether she had been here before, whether she had reincarnated many times. I have been to different planes at different times. Each one is a level of higher consciousness. What plane we go to depends upon how far we've progressed. She was silent again. I asked her what lessons she had to learn in order to progress. She answered immediately.
So again, there are many souls in multiple dimensions, many levels of consciousness. Even in Hinduism, right? The reality that we are existing in has one Brahman, one Brahma, right? And there are multiple dimensions like this. And then ultimately you go to that one Brahman, right? So there are many Brahmas and various different realities are there. So again, as we progress, we move into a higher and higher dimension or a higher and higher reality, and then ultimately we go to the Godhead.
She answered immediately that we must share our knowledge with other people, that we all have abilities far beyond what we use. Some of us find this out sooner than others, that you should check your vices before you come to this point. If you do not, you carry them over with you to another life. Only we can rid ourselves of the bad habits that we accumulate when we are in the physical state.
So this again becomes patterns, habits that we develop, right? We need to start getting aware of them and we need to transcend, we need to get out of the pattern. Otherwise, the imprint of the pattern can be carried forward with us. We can't take in any material possessions with us, but the habits and the thought process will always go with us. So Robert Monroe always says that ultimately, when we are going into these expanded states, it's very important for us to be observant about our thoughts. What are we thinking? Where are we thinking from? What is the state of consciousness that we are operating in? All these factors will start to come into play.
The masters cannot do that for us. If you choose to fight and not to rid yourself, then you will carry them over into another life. And only when you decide that you are strong enough to master the external problems, then you will no longer have them in your next life.
So this is very much like the concept of the vasanas, the sanchit vasanas and the prarabdha vasanas, right? We need to get rid of all the vasanas that we have. And once we get rid of it, that's when we start moving into the higher dimensions and we can transfer faster.
And only when you decide that you are strong enough to master the external problems, then you will no longer have them in your next life. We also must learn not to just go to those people whose vibrations are same as ours. It is normal to feel drawn to somebody who is on the same level that you are. But this is wrong. You must also go to those people whose vibrations are wrong with yours. This is the importance in helping these people.
So
We
again, over here, when we are vibrating at a particular frequency and someone is vibrating at a lower frequency, we can help to pick them up by coming into contact with them. Likewise, in my view over here, we must also look for people who are vibrating at a higher level of vibratory frequency than us so that we can also progress. I think it works both ways.
We are given intuitive powers we should follow and not try to resist. Those who resist will meet with danger. We are not sent back from each plane with equal powers. Some of us possess powers greater than others because they have been accrued from other times. Thus, people are not all created equal. But eventually, we will reach a point where we will all be equal.
So again, we are a subset, or we are the result of all the experiences that we have had, right? And everyone has had different experiences. So naturally, we are all vibrating or operating at different levels of consciousness. Having said that, the striving has always been to go into that oneness, right? And now when we get into that oneness, then naturally everyone becomes equal.
Catherine paused. I knew these thoughts were not hers. She had no background in physics or metaphysics. She knew nothing about planes and dimensions and vibrations. But beyond that, the beauty of the words and thoughts, the philosophical implication of these utterings, these were all beyond Catherine's capabilities. She had never talked in such a concise, poetic manner. I could feel another, higher force struggling with her mind and vocal cords to translate these thoughts into words so that I could understand. No, this was not Catherine.
So again, basically what is happening when we are operating at a higher level of consciousness and someone is operating at a lower level of consciousness, then we need to lower the tone and the precision of our communication so that this person can understand. So what Dr. Brian West is clearly saying here, that an entity who is operating at a higher level of consciousness is speaking through the vocal cords of Catherine and attempting to transmute or transfer messages and information to him through the voice of Catherine. I think we can stop here.
Stop the recording.